Well, welcome to the 11th Hard Facts About Soft Skills for HR Professionals. I have a question for you. Do you have cultural competency? What about the organization you work for? And what role does communication play in our understanding of various cultures, both within the United States and all around the world? For those of you who don't know, I'm Lynda Katz Wilner, and I'm the founder of Successfully Speaking. I am a speech, language, and soft skills executive coach, and I help you and your teams speak, sound, and look like leaders. I do this with public speaking training, voice improvement, and also accent modification. And it's through my work over the years, working on accent modification, that has made me appreciate the different cultures all around the world, because my clients are all around the world and all around the United States. And so I've always been fascinated with culture. But now more than ever, it's changing a lot. I mentioned cultural competency, and we'll hear from Jeanette. It may be a little bit more than that, but that's how I always learned about it. Before I introduce my wonderful guest, I just want to go through a few housekeeping rules, just so you know what to expect. We are going to have the interview from 12 to 12:30. And if you can keep your mics muted and your cameras off, that way you can see both of us. Please put the Zoom in the gallery mode so you can see both Jeanette and me. We'll talk till 12:30. We will have a breakout group. We'll have different groups to talk about a question that we'll pose at the end. And then we'll come back at 12:40 to recap and ask questions and have some discussion. Jeanette and I will stay here until 12:55, and at that point we will stop so that everybody can get to their next meeting. Now I'd like to introduce you to our guest. I had the pleasure of meeting Jeanette Lenoir several months ago through my husband at a meeting, and he said, "You must speak to this person. You would love speaking to her because of what she does." And Jeanette is a journalist with Blurbus America, but I think it's more than just her role as a journalist that's so fascinating. We had a chance to talk, had an engaging, stimulating, and thought-provoking conversation, and I knew she would be a wonderful guest for the Hard Facts About Soft Skills. We also wanted to do this in November because we're coming upon Thanksgiving next week, believe it or not, next week. And right around the corner are the winter holidays. And I think during this time of the year, we start to appreciate or see different cultures. And so we thought it would be a great time to have this interview. So first and foremost, I'd like to welcome you, Jeanette. Welcome to our interview today.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here and to be your guest.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait because I have so many questions for you. And what I loved when I first spoke to you is when you just told me how you got to where you are today. I love your background. So could you share your background with everybody here?
Absolutely. I'm from Suriname. But beyond that, I'm from a tribe. I'm part of a tribe, and my tribe is called we're Pamaka people. So we are one of the 5 remaining African tribes that were brought over during the African diaspora, and we landed in South America. So my ancestors are the escaped Africans who were brought over to be part of slavery. And so my ancestors are the ones who jumped off the slave ships and ran into the jungles, basically, of South America. And in time were able to establish their own societies. And there's only 5 remaining. There's Pamaka, Samaka, Unjuka, Matawai, and there's one more, and I can't think of the last group, but Aluku people. So, but I'm a Pamaka tribal person. So that is who I am. And that's how I got here. My father is a American from Oklahoma. He was an anthropologist, and he was working on his thesis. And so he decided to go to Suriname to work on his thesis and study cultural anthropology. And so during his time there, he met my mother, who was, one of the chief's daughters, and he essentially married, one of the chief's daughters and had 3 children. So I am literally a product of culture. And so that's why culture has shaped my life, my identity, and continues to buoy me in this experience of life. So that's why I value culture.
Right. And Jeanette, let's start with some basics. What is culture? How would you define culture?
We tend to look at culture very simplistically and on a human level. For example, how we do things around here. But culture is so much more than that. Culture is deep. Culture is stable. Culture is complex. Culture is mission, strategies, means, measurement, remedial systems. Culture is extensive and operates out of awareness as well. And what I wanted to share here is the 3 levels of culture, and that is artifacts, basically visible organizational structure, what we see around us, espoused values, strategies, goals, and philosophies, and that could be in an organization or in a group of people. And also underlying assumptions. Underlying assumptions cover unconscious, taken for granted beliefs, perceptions, feelings, and this is ultimately the source of values and our actions. Our perceptions dictate our actions when it comes to how we view the world and others.
So just to review that for a second, you said the artifacts is the first, and I know you had the underlying assumptions. Tell us again what the second one was, Jeanette.
The second one is espoused values.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about strategies, goals, and philosophies. So
And I just remember when we talk about culture, again, it's probably so overdone, but it's that iceberg that we see certain things on the surface, but there's more, exponentially more below the surface, because don't we have the cultures you mentioned before we even started, the cultures in the workplace, the culture if you work in a hospital versus a law firm, the culture if you're in a hospital, the doctor versus the nurses. And
That's right.
So we have career cultures,
Absolutely.
as well as ethnic, as well as language. I think that there's so much gender.
Absolutely. Yes, that's right. And it's organizational culture it shows up in so many ways. It shows up in established employees. It shows up in new employees. It shows up in our reward systems, in how we punish certain people, hierarchy. What type of organizational culture is it? Is it a flat network type of culture? Is it command and control type of culture? There's so many different elements of culture as it relates to work and our daily lives. And what would make it a healthier experience is our awareness of culture and all the different levels of culture. And so raising our awareness about our cultural structures, not just here in the United States, but around the world, especially we're becoming a global society. Even within the United States, we are very diverse. So people, when they come here, we have a shared experience in addition to their own experience that they bring to the table, which is very interesting. And it shapes organizational cultures as well.
So, and I know you spoke about when you met with me the first time about Blurbus America and how you even talked about the culture of a jazz festival in one part of the country.
That's right.
Another. So tell us a little bit about what Blurbus America has to do with culture.
Well, eBlurbus America is an online platform, an online magazine that I created. And the goal was to talk about American culture specifically. And it was born out of my experience of moving from a big city to a small city. I had never experienced small town America. When I did experience small town America, I was shocked. It was a cultural shock that I was living in a country, the United States, and yet I experienced it to be very segregated. It was eye-opening for me, and I wanted to talk about that. So I created a platform that would allow me to share stories as a way to bridge the gap, as a way for us to get to know each other on a different level, to basically, let's peek under the iceberg and see what else is under there other than just what's on the surface. And I believe it can be a pathway to healing our nation, especially now as we are, there's a lot of turmoil in politics, and, there's all these uncomfortable situations coming up to the surface, and it's hard to talk about them, but we have to talk about them in order for us to get through them, so we can get to the healing part and really experience our nation as a united nation, because ultimately we have more in common than not.
And you and I know that communication is a big part of bridging that gap.
Absolutely.
What I'd like to do now that we have more people who have come in, and I want to, let's take a poll, because we do talk about HR professionals, and that's a big part of the audience today, although we know a lot of other people are here as well. But I'm going to launch this poll, and I'd like everybody to participate in this. And the question is, how would you rate your organization regarding cultural inclusion and awareness? And so is it little or no initiatives? Is it, oh my goodness, okay, I saw some jump up right away. Some training initiatives like 2 to 4 times a year. Maybe they do it monthly, or maybe you do it more than once a month. So let's see if more people, we don't have everybody in yet, about 50% have answered the poll. Let's get a sense, and that helps us understand where the audience is actually coming from. We have a few more moments here. And then, let's see, we've got 61% responding. Any more? And okay, I'm going to close that now, just to give you an idea. And Jeanette, here's what we have. So it's neck and neck with maybe monthly and 2 to 4 times a year, which to me sounds very good. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that's a great thing. And, on the heels of the tragic incident that happened to George Floyd, I think there's a lot more awareness. As a matter of fact, you saw a lot of companies, major companies, Fortune 500 companies, major companies from Amazon to even Ben and Jerry's putting out major statements saying, we won't stand for this, and we will be deliberately working to change the inequalities that they're seeing, and the discrimination and the racism. It is an uncomfortable truth, but it is part of our American culture, and recognizing it will allow us to work on it in a healthy way and change the dynamics on the ground.
And it sounds like, unfortunately, because of that, but that became a pivotal event where there are a lot more conversations now.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just about that. There's been so many other incidences similar to the George Floyd incident, but now we're really seeing it. It is a very aggressive, in your face type of display. And, as we are becoming more diverse as a nation, it becomes more personal. And when another cultural thing that we talk about is, you never know someone unless you walk a mile in their shoes, right? So we're starting to walk miles in each other's shoes. And so it creates an opportunity for us to get to know each other better. So that's what I'm hoping to facilitate.
Right. And what are some of the common, although unintentional, cultural gaps that people make? And we'll do a poll in a moment about that, but tell me what you think is intentional. We've talked a lot about this already.
Oh, sure. There's so many. There's so many, but we make assumptions about people's religion. We make assumptions about people's appearances. Right? We make assumptions about also space. Some people, how close are you to me? We make assumptions about time. There's certain organizations who have a strict view and philosophy on time, and others are a little bit more lax about time, and doing more than one thing at one time. So there's all these different things, but some of the gaffes are, for example, um, if you celebrate a certain holiday, not every African American celebrates Kwanzaa. So if to go up to somebody who's African American and say, "Oh, are you celebrating Kwanzaa?" That person may say, "I don't celebrate Kwanzaa," or but they could say they could feel a sense of offense. They could take some offense to that question, although it may be purely innocent. That person would say, "Well, you made an assumption about me based on this and this and this, and I don't appreciate that." And the same thing goes to people who celebrate Hanukkah, right? We're here in the United States, it's more common to celebrate Christmas, the birth of Jesus Christ, and so forth. We are a majority Christian country, but we do celebrate other religions as well. So, we sometimes make these gaffes on cultural lines that tend to ruffle some feathers.
And we have to understand that the person who's saying it, hopefully, and we'll do a poll in a second. In fact, I'll put the poll up here as we're talking, that it's good intentions. It's good intentions to remark, and somebody might be offended by it. So one of the questions as we continue to talk, I'll just keep this on the screen, is have you unintentionally offended someone with a question or statement about their hair or ethnic clothing?
Yeah.
And let me, as people are answering that, it makes me laugh because we've always had this conversation, and my husband, who has said that when he goes to networking meetings, some people say, "Oh, are you retired?" And he said, "Well, what about that made you think I'm retired? Because I look older or I have gray hair?"
Right.
Why make assumptions like that? And to me, that's such a simple gaffe, but it's the same type of gaffe people are making beyond that. We'll after we have the poll about the hair, I'll share again the gaffe that I made about somebody's hair, and it was purely good intentions, but this person was offended by me. So what other ones? In fact, let's see, we have about 72% people voted. Let's just show, and I think this is really interesting. 36% said yes, I have made unintentionally offended. 21 said no, but what's so interesting, Jeanette, and maybe you could speak to this, 43% said, I don't know. Because unless somebody tells us, we don't know that we said something wrong.
Absolutely. And the hair one is a very interesting one. It's a good example. For example, if you were to go to someone, especially African American, a Black woman, we are for years, since the beginning of the whole race structure, Black people, and especially Black women, have been criticized. They put down their hair, for you to be seen. The idea of what beautiful is to look more Caucasian, or to have a more Caucasian look. That was the standard of beauty. So they were putting our looks down, and saying, this is the way you should look. This is acceptable. And so as we adapt, and so some women, they would say, no, in the 60s, they were, this rebellion of afros, here and there. It was just like, no, we're going to claim our identity. There are phrases like Black is beautiful, and so forth. So when somebody comes and says, is your hair real, or is that a wig, or is this that, it opens up wounds. It opens up the cul-de-sac of history that has been very hurtful and painful and damaging to Black women, especially, to many people, but especially our appearances are so important to us. We want to show up looking our best. Mm-hmm. So unintentionally, someone who may just have a question could unintentionally expose some hurt that, but that could also create an opportunity for understanding. I think that, we can walk away with understanding there's opportunity there.
And that's a great point, because Jeanette, the conversation I told you about is I worked in a facility where there was a woman, and she was probably the only Black professional level employee there.
Right.
She was the social worker.
Mm-hmm.
And every day her hair was different. I loved it. She just looked great. I mean, she was this beautiful woman, and every day was different. And one day I said to her, "Oh, your hair looks great. Is it a wig? Like, how do you change it so much every day?" And I thought we were friendly. And she looked at me like, "Well, how could you ask me that?"
Yeah.
And it's like, what did I do wrong? But I didn't have the courage to say to her, what did I do wrong? How could I have said that better? I thought I was complimenting you.
Right.
And so that the communication was missing, that we didn't take it that next step so that I could learn from it.
Yes. And it's okay to apologize
Mm-hmm.
and humble yourself. It's okay to say, hey, I really didn't mean to. I did not know. Teach me.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually come to it at a different angle as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you never know, you could create a best friend from just that exchange. It doesn't have to wash down the drain and not come back to life and bloom. It can actually bloom. So, but it all depends on how you communicate.
Communicating can bond us, or it can break us apart.
Absolutely.
And one thing I neglected to mention, for everybody listening, type in the chat room if there are some things that you have unintentionally done related to either hair or dress or religion or gender or whatever it might be. It would be interesting to see some of your experiences so we can discuss those as well. So feel free to post. We're watching the chat room for that. And as we move forward, I think you already talked about the holidays, so I don't know that we need to talk about that more. But what about what techniques can employees and HR implement so that we can improve the organizational culture? Because that's the big problem. We're at the workplace a lot, or we will be again. We are remotely right now. But how can we help? How can we improve the culture within our own organizations?
First, the want to has to be there, and you must approach it deliberately. And similar to how we approach sexual harassment training, similar to how we approach unconscious bias training, and all types of training, is the same way we should approach cross-cultural training. So that way, everyone that's part of an organization feels valued, and creating a safe space where uh, superiors and their subordinates are able to find common ground, where you're not just listening to employees and other staff members, but you're hearing them. That's important. And this could show up in ways of having a suggestion box. You can have the training, like I said, and there are also softwares that are available for different organizations that they can implement and have their employees take part in it. So that way they can measure how your staff and your organization, how they're feeling. And then once you have that type of cultural assessment, then you can say, okay, here's what's going on. And it's a window into your organization. And then from there, you can work to improve it. But first you have to want to. And right now we're in a national place of want to, and that is very, very healthy. Just the fact that I'm sitting here talking to you about cross-cultural training and the importance of training, of culture and communications, is evidence of the want to, not just the need to.
I think you make a good point, because I know I've spoken to a lot of people who do a lot of diversity training, and they say that for I don't know if it's decades, I don't know how long it's been, but there's a lot of diversity in the workplace, but there hasn't always been the inclusion or the equity. And so I think that's what's changing at this point. And you can have the diversity, but if you're not communicating with everybody, then you're not including them.
That's right.
So.
And upskilling, it's okay to, what really makes the strongest organization, the strongest, the cultures, the organizations with the strongest cultures are those who promote from within.
Mhm.
That promoting from within really boost an organization and the culture and the family, so to speak. So it is healthy to upskill and to do that deliberately with people of color. You know, when you look around, for the most part, when you look at different organizations, usually the highest ranking people are Caucasians or usually not people of color. So to deliberately upskill and promote within your organization actually makes your organization stronger. And who doesn't want a stronger organization, you know?
And who doesn't want different communication styles and different ways of doing things? So the diversity, they've always said diversity makes teams better.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, but different organizations, before we even got on, different organizations handle things differently. And one of the examples I wanted to share with you is when we talked about the um, the culture of uh, punishment and also um, rewarding people. I'm sure a lot of people know who Shonda Rhimes is. Shonda Rhimes, she's such a great example and a very new example of a cultural breakdown. Um, she's Shonda Rhimes is a TV producer, a screenwriter, an author.
Grey's
She
Anatomy, right?
That's right, Private Practice, Scandal. I mean, she's a black woman, you know, which is also unheard of. She is a unicorn in the field, so to speak, in this field. So she certainly made a name for herself and created so many great shows. But she was with ABC, the network ABC, for 13 years. But she recently left ABC for Netflix. And she did an interview and she said her reason for leaving ABC after such a long and prosperous career was because of an incident that happened with her asking for tickets to go to Disney World, right? And this again goes to how an organization rewards their employees. And that sometimes falls on ethnic lines, you know, but also, you know, the person's sex. All of these play key roles in how certain situations are handled. So Shonda Rhimes says, ask for tickets. Sure, she can afford tickets to go to Disney World with her family. You know, she's a multimillionaire. But she wanted to be rewarded by her company, whom she has delivered for. She wanted to be appreciated. She wanted them to show it, not in monetary ways, but in a reward way, and to show that, hey, we value you. You know, sure, you can afford this, but we're going to make sure that you're first in line at Disney World, Disneyland, wherever you want to be, and you'll be treated like royalty. That would convey to her that, hey, she's valued. I am valued. But that's not what happened. She asked for the tickets. They gave her a couple of tickets. She asked for one more. Even when she asked for the first several tickets, they said there was a little haggling. There was a little bit of, okay, why do you need so many? This and that. And then she, you know, after she got the ticket, she asked for one more ticket. And so that supposedly created an issue. And so one of the CEOs of ABC, one of the top echelons, said to her, well, when she finally got the ticket, she takes her family to Disneyland, and one of the tickets did not work. They would not let her in. So she makes a phone call and says, hey, you know, we can't get in. There's a problem. And of course, she's expecting her organization to, of course, back her up, show that we value you and we're rewarding you for what you've done for us. But instead, the person she reached out to said, haven't we given you enough? Don't you have enough? And she said it was that moment that she decided to leave ABC after 13 years with the company, creating so many shows that have contributed to our culture of entertainment. What she has done is not just impactful in the United States, but all over the world. Not just in entertainment, but in her skin as a Black woman. You know, she's important figure. She's important in so many ways,
Black woman, a female producer. I mean, and writer.
As exactly.
I'm looking at the time, Jeanette, because I know we can talk for hours, and we've done before. I just want to comment a few things. Wendy had mentioned, some of the posts that people said, Wendy once told a Russian client that his speech reminded her of Fiddler on the Roof, which sounds like, oh, that's so sweet, but they may not have liked that at all.
Yeah.
I dealt with the fact that I didn't like that people stereotyped me because I had a Long Island accent when I was in college, because I was in Maryland. And they teased me in a loving way. And I did not like that because they weren't listening to me and they were pigeonholing me. So they're all different micro aggressions that seem harmless, but they can be very offensive. One other thing here, let's see. Tangela said, we've created a culture, diversity, inclusion task force, which of course is ideal. That's what we want to happen. And Jennifer even said that she always has to remind herself not to assume where someone is from just by the way they look, because it could be offensive. And she's had people told her to color her hair, her gray hair.
Oh, you see?
These are all little things that are said that certainly affect people. And so that leads us into what I want to do for the breakout group. We both want to do it. We spoke about this. And we've talked about names. And you said there are a lot of controversies on the subject of names, and that there is some well-documented research that African-American or ethnic sounding names have less chances of getting hired compared to those with Caucasian names. Very interesting. So we'd like to go into breakout rooms and discuss names. Like, have you experienced that in your organization? I know not everybody here is HR, but everybody knows people with different types of names. And how would you handle that situation? And do you think cross-cultural training would remove some stigma that we have with names? Because people have become very judgmental, or maybe they're becoming less now. So we're going to go out into a great breakout room for about 7 minutes. Marnie, if you can set it for 7 minutes, because we were talking about so many things here. And then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about it. Well, we just don't have enough time to cover all the things that we want to talk about. And if you want now, everybody's coming back in, you can open up your mics, because we'd like to have more of an open discussion, unless you have vacuums going on or construction outside or dogs barking or but I think it was great, and we'll see people are coming back in. There's still a lot of people who haven't come back in yet. If you're back, please open up your camera so we can see you now for this part of the session. And we had some interesting comments in our group. I'll wait until more people are coming in. Jennifer, do you want to just briefly, because we want to get to a few of the groups, briefly mention some of the takeaways? We never got to talk about HR or work, but maybe.
We talked about names and common names and spelling names and Aisha, did I spell your name? His daughter's name's Aisha, right?
Isha.
Isha. Her daughter, she named her daughter Isha, so it was easy and wouldn't be mispronounced, and it was a international global name, and it had a lot of meanings. We talked about who had a challenge naming my first child, who was named after my mother. My child ended up being a girl, so she was named Caroline. I thought of Carrie, but the reference to the movie Carrie, for people who were of that generation and know the famous Sissy Spacek scene, I couldn't do that. And we talked about how, names are powerful. And Lynda named her son Michael, which is a common name, but spelled it differently. And now people pronounce it incorrectly. Anything else I forgot? Did I forget anything?
Not just the importance, I think we say, of names. And it becomes, so we're not even talking about in the workplace, but names that are unique become problematic sometimes to the person who has that name. I think this may have gone in a different direction that Jeanette and I were thinking, but certainly names are loaded. Who else was a facilitator of their group that would want to share Gloria, what did you
Yeah,
talk about?
in our group, we only talked about names, so we didn't get to the other question. And what really struck me in our group is the importance of names, right? And we have Tangela in the group who said she had experienced at work people trying to shorten her name or give her a nickname.
Mhm.
And then she had to say, no, it's my name, right? And it's proud. People have also mispronounced her name. And then Mary, she said it's music to her ears when people can pronounce her last name correctly. So to me, what just stood out is the importance and value of names. And Michelle is in human resources and does recruiting. So she is constantly looking at resumes and wanting to demonstrate that care to say those names correctly or to make a good impression.
Great. And I'll add to it that with Tiksha, when we started, I said, am I saying your name correctly? And her first response was, it's close enough. And I said, no, close enough isn't good. Teach me how to say it so that I can honor you with your saying your name correctly. And I've heard that time and time again with many people who have African names, and they say there's so much importance, and many other cultures too, but there's so much importance, and people say, well, I'll just call him something else. And that's not what that person wants unless they tell you to do that. So I think we have to be really sensitive to that. Was there another group that, Lynda, who spells it differently from me, even though it's a very common name?
So we discussed names as well, but we discussed it on like a recruiting level. And so I shared with my experience of one of my managers who he's been having a really hard time filling his roles. And he finally said, look, when I'm getting resumes submitted to me, I don't want to see what their name is. I don't want to see where they live. I don't want to see what their location is. Because he, in his mind, he believes that if he receives a resume for someone named Josh Smith versus, Quentin, or like a really long name, he doesn't want it to be in his mind of, well, I automatically disqualify them from their name, even though he knows that in the end it's a qualification, but he just wants to avoid any arguments that's going to be made where he would be discriminating against any candidate. And then another team member had shared on the breakout room that one of her managers, after reviewing a stack of resumes, was concerned about the candidate's speech or their communication skills based on their name.
You mean assuming
right, making an assumption based on their name that they aren't a great communicator or that English isn't their first language.
Wow.
So implicit bias is one of the bigger thing, that biases which we kind of have without really, because I'm in talent acquisition, we come across that. And we have kind of thought about maybe we should just put a serial number and no name.
Yeah, so for this particular manager, we just started submitting initials, first initial, last initial.
Jeanette, do you have anything to add to any of these comments? I know we've had this conversation, the two of us.
Yeah, that's actually part of the efforts that are being made. So the fact that Lynda mentioned that your HR person doesn't want to see the names, that's actually part of the training. That's what they suggest that you do. Get rid of the names and just look at the whole person, which will be in the qualifications. But it's just, I think that's very healthy. And our unconscious bias shows up. It's unconscious for a reason. We all judge each other. We judge each other's looks. We judge each other's outfits. We judge all. That's just human nature. Our nature is just that. It's human. So it does show up. But so you have to take that extra step, like Lynda was talking about, to remove that. So that way you can really work on a more wholesome level and being more, not making it a transactional thing, but but personalizing it, being more of a personal thing. I think that makes the whole experience better, So I think that's great.
I think in some research I've read that neuroscience, they say we're wired to see differences, not similarities. It's me versus them. And that's where the problem lies, because our brains are wired that way. We don't always say, well, what do I have in common with Liz? The first thing is, well, what's different? Oh, Liz has straight hair, I have curly hair. I mean, it's so subtle, but we recognize differences a lot sooner than we recognize similarities. So maybe we need that mind shift of looking at it a different way. We don't have time for this, but there's a wonderful clip from Trevor Noah on names and how his name is pronounced. And Marty's going to actually put the clip, the link, in the chat box. So save the chat if you want to check it out. It's done so well because not everybody realizes he's from South Africa, and he talks about how he says his name and how people say his name and how he deals with that challenge. So Marty put that in. So be sure to check it out at the 4:06 minute mark, because it's a great clip about that. Did we miss any of the groups? Did anybody have any other takeaways from their breakout group?
Hi, this is Monica at Calvio. We went off on just a little small tangent where we discussed where during the hiring process, one of the owners of the company said, I don't want to hire the N-word, and I don't want to hire a Mexican. I don't care how qualified they are, because a white person is always better for any position. So we talked about diversity and inclusion and unchanging, trying to work with the ways that they can look at things differently, to introduce new ideas, to allow them to say that, hey, diversity and inclusion makes us stronger, makes us better. We can complete projects. We can do things in a better way.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Monica. And somebody told me the way to help me understand it better when I was trying to learn more about this is that diversity brings everybody to the table, but inclusion allows you to eat. I thought, well, that was an interesting way to look at that.
Love that.
Yeah. So now we're getting up. It's 12:50 now, and again, I know we can have more and more conversations about this. But Jeanette, what are some of your takeaways? What would you like us to leave this interview series? What tips or pieces of information do you want us to have?
Well, I'd love the takeaway that I would love for you to have is to be positive about people, is to believe in people, is to be a practical humanist, and to care about people, not just to be nice on general principle, but to be nice because you get more things done. You know, it's not just about being nice. It's about how do we get things done? And you can always get more things done by treating everyone kindly and as a human, seeing the whole person rather than having a transactional relationship where we both show up. You expect me to say this, I expect you to say that. You have to be deliberate in going beyond that and just being positive about human beings. So that would be my takeaway. And also gratitude. I'm grateful for these opportunities for us to bridge the gaps and to get to know each other better on a human level and on an American cultural level, because we certainly have that in common.
So thank you so much, Jeanette. I think this has been a wonderful discussion and more food for thought. And I guess it will certainly make us, the next time we meet somebody, think a little bit about their name or how to say the name. Or do they need to change the name Shen to Stephen? You know, is that important in our culture? And sometimes people believe it is, but maybe we need to question that a little bit. Should we be embracing our cultural identity or code switching in different situations? I don't think any of us have the answers, but Jeanette, through this discussion, or Jeanette, is that what your name actually is?
Yeah, Jeanette, yeah. So being from Suriname, people butcher my name all the time, but I don't mind. My actual name is Jeanette or Jeanette, but like I told you when I first moved here, they're like, you mean Jeanette? I'm like, okay, fine, it's Jeanette. But my family in my country, they call me Jeanette. And my last name is Lenoir. But everyone here, they're like, you mean Lenoir? I'm like, okay, fine, it's Lenoir. I'm not going to fight about it.
But then we need to start thinking about that. Should we accept almost, or do we let people know what our names are and have pride in our names? And hopefully we're getting more towards that, and perhaps discussions like this and sharing people's ideas and their reactions to things. And I could tell millions of stories in my experience of how people do react to their names. We just don't have time here. But thank you so much for just opening our eyes, Jeanette, to some of this information so we can learn more and be more culturally sensitive, culturally competent, or whatever it might be, but opening up the conversation. We will be following this up with an email, and we will give a link to the video if you came in late and missed the beginning part. Feel free, and we'll be sending some links, but reach out to Jeanette, reach out to me. You can join my mailing list, connect with us on LinkedIn so we can continue these conversations. And feel free to just let us know if you have any questions even afterwards. Let us know. And Jeanette, thank you again. It's been a thrill having you here. And for everybody else, have a wonderful, healthy, safe Thanksgiving and holiday season, however we decide to celebrate this year.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time.
Okay.